Hi everyone, and welcome back in the sections of videos where I'm trying to talk and to give you some feedbacks about my experience in Prypiat in October 2021. This video is to support donations, so that's the reason why you will find the videos from now till I don't know when with the tag creators with Ukraine. I explaining what is it in the past videos, so just take a look, and please, if you are interested, still try to donate for Ukraine population and for Ukraine people who are still there. The war is not finished yet, so today I would like to share also the first pictures and the first videos, and I think that could be interesting to start talking about Prypiat itself. So Prypiat was built in 1970, and it was built because of course it was with the intention to host all the people and all the workers that would have been strictly connected to the nuclear power plant. At that time, the Soviet Union system was supporting so much workers and people who were studying so much and were supporting the revolution in terms of technology, in terms of scientific stuff. So the Soviet Union was trying really to be important in all the world because of that kind of things, of that kind of aspect. And the nuclear power plant was also a revolution because it was consisting in a certain way, and actually also nowadays it's something that could be quite helpful to give and to support cities in terms of energies. In reality, many people think that the nuclear power plant of Chernobyl is sited in Chernobyl. It's not really true, because Chernobyl is 10 kilometers far away from the nuclear power plant. The nearest city is Prypiat, and so all the workers were living there. One of the most interesting aspects that shocked me when I heard it the first time was that the people received the home from the state. So everything belonged. How is the verb in the past tense? Belong. You know what it is, no? Everything belonged to the state. So the homes belongs to the state, the flats, the buildings, everything was of the state. And depending on how many people were living in a family, you could receive a bigger home or a smaller home. And generally the workers, the very young workers, were living in very small apartments, in very small flats, because they still had to decide exactly where they wanted to live, you know. And that's exactly the kind of reality that we can observe in Prypiat. I think that could be very interesting to make a sort of run at that city. The most interesting scenario that you can find there is the energetic culture palace. I think it's very essential to underline this kind of aspect, because many people do not know what is the energetic, what is a palace, a culture palace, because personally, I come from Italy, and in Italy we do not have a city with a culture palace. I mean, I never heard about these kind of things. If there is the existence of something like this, please tell me. I found it in Bratislava, which is an S country, but in all the oldest countries there is not something like this. Well, the cultural palace is a palace, a building of reference for all the people. So you must imagine something which is basically for the community, you know, something where there was a sort of political propaganda, and where all the people were basically instructed to trust and to believe in this propaganda. At that time, the most important politician was Lenin, and so everyone was trying to respect Lenin perspectives and to respect also this kind of personality, to be like Lenin. Also, the little child were instructed so that they could basically take inspirations, because Lenin was a very excellent student, and so all the children had to respect this kind of image of Lenin, you know. So they had to be wonderful students, also like Lenin was in the past when he was a child. And You also must imagine that some workers, I guess everyone, dependently from which kind of work you was doing, all the workers, some in some specific days of the week, had to meet in this palace or at specific rooms of the buildings where they were working 1 hour earlier, respect their normal hour shift. And basically this was because for 1 hour all the people, all the workers were instructed with this political propaganda. And it was also true for the students, so the little child but also the older students were supposed to meet 1 hour earlier before starting to work in the morning on specific days of the week to, of course, to follow and to be instructed about political propaganda, about learning propaganda. This is because the people were living in a community, in a strict community, so the energetic cultural palace is the main part. Indeed, it was in the main square. And this is quite famous, this kind of square. I will gonna try maybe to put some images about the square. Exactly there, next to the cultural palace, you could find any other kind of things, important things, like for instance the most important hotel of Prypiat, which is called Polisia. And it's called Polisia because the region of Ukraine where you can find Prypiat and Chernobyl is Polisia, so they are located in Polisia region. And another important building was the White Palace, which is not really white and was not also in the past white. It's like pinkish, something like this, but it was the most important building because basically in there were living the most important people, you know, like important scientists, important political figures, important people in general. And in the Polisia hotel, next to it there was also like a conference room, so there was not the property, you know, the private property. So if you were living in a flat, the flat was not yours and there was not the possibility to have this flat. I mean, I'm not 100% sure of this, but from what I've heard and from what I have read, there was not really the possibility to have the property, your private property. Depending on how people were living in a family, you could have received a bigger or a smaller flat, but everything, really everything, belonged to the state. And the only things that you could have were basically your clothes, your books, maybe some furniture, some kind of things like that, but anything else was belonging to the state. And most of the people were basically who were moving in Prypiat received a flat, and the flat could also change in terms of dimension depending on the position, so on which kind of people you were. So depending on how much you was studying, how much you was instructed, how much you wanted to reach the highest position, you could receive better flats, smaller flats. a look inside the flats, we can see that generally they are very small. If I compare these flats, also the biggest ones, to the big flats that I have in my mind where I also lived when I was a child, yeah, the dimensions are very small and there are not so many rooms, but this is basically fitting exactly the kind of a community idea they had at the time, because people were really living in a community, so they were not spending so much time at home. And that's the main reason why the flats were not so big, because the flats could not be a very comfortable place where people had to be satisfied in all the terms, because the people were living basically outside their flat. So they were living with their family inside the flat, but most of the times basically they were living outside. So for their work, for their activities, they were spending most of the day outside home. At the time, during the Soviet Union, in Russia, not in Ukraine, I'm not 100% sure of this, but anyway, there were the Kumunaka. The Kumunaka were big flats with several rooms where many families were living, sharing common spaces, like for instance the bathrooms and the kitchen were shared in common. So there were many room spaces where there were basically different families with their children and so on, but then the common spaces were shared through all these families live. So you must imagine like very big flats with 10 rooms, one kitchen, one bathroom. But this is something that I never heard about in Prypiat, so I'm not 100% sure that there could be also in Prypiat, but this is just to explain how the people were living. So it was very important, the community, the sense and the spirit of community. Considering the age, so it was the 1970, the 1980, people were living a very active life, so there were so many attractions and things. There was the swimming pool, which is also quite famous. Unfortunately, I did not have the possibility to visit the swimming pool because the building was in dangerous situation, so I could not visit it. But anyway, there was this very famous swimming pool which became so famous after the accident. And then there was also the theater. Apart from the cultural palace, there was also the cinema. There were so many things for the people, so the people could really spend their time on the streets, on these big squares, on these places. It was really in contact with nature. Also, there were also very interesting coffee, so Prypiat coffee, which was exactly sitting next to the river. I think that could be enough as a video where I could share a little bit about Prypiat city. Next time maybe I could tell you something more about the nuclear power plant. So thanks for having watched this video, get subscribed, support the donations for Ukraine, and stay tuned.